Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everyone. Hi, Barry. Great to see you again.
Well, here we are.
Here we are, another show.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk this week about unconditional love versus enabling. And the reason this is up for me right now is, and I encounter this quite often, I have a client right now who is really struggling with her son with addictions, and how much, she wants to be this loving mother, obviously, and support and help. But at the same time, are we crossing into enabling? And as I've mentioned before, most of my work is with people that suffer from codependency, and this is a huge one. And hands up here, me too. This is my Achilles heel, is when it comes to my children. I'm pretty good at establishing firm boundaries with other people, but when I see my children struggling, and that sort of question comes up. It's like, am I enabling or am I being understanding? Am I being too understanding? What am I doing here? So I think it's a great subject to bring up. Of course, it also happens within our relationships. I think it's easier to deal with when it's with another adult or a partner. I think it's when there's that dynamic of the parent-child where it's more challenging for people, I've seen anyway.
Well, it's the same. I mean, yes, absolutely. And there is sometimes the parent-child dynamic happening in regular relationships too, not just in parent-child relationships, where one partner can end up acting the role of the parent and the other can end up acting the role of the child. And just to be
That's
transparent, some early
Yeah,
relationships, I kind of occupied the child space myself in my partnerships. It wasn't healthy, wasn't
yeah,
sexy either, but that behavior, but that paradigm does tend to happen sometimes in just adult relationships too. So
yeah.
this combination would definitely apply to a lot of people who may not have kids in this context.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a whole other show unto itself, that parent-child in
Oh, God, yes,
yeah, within your relationship, because that can really unravel a few things. So maybe that's the next one.
just a touch, yes.
We're going to talk about, as I say, well, first of all, let's define what enabling is for people, because
Hmm.
some people say, well, what is it, enabling? It's when you are, when there's obviously something going wrong in somebody's life. Say, for example, you have a child, and they may be, one of the most obvious behaviors are either drugs or alcohol, but it could also be video games. It can be gambling. It can be sex addiction. It can be a lot of different addictions or behaviors that are causing the person you love immense amounts of pain, but they can't seem to get any control over it. And so, of course, you're going to feel compassion, you're going to feel love, you're going to want to help, you're going to want to, catch your children when they fall. But I think what we have to do is look at what some of the ways, again, as enabling can be. It can be that they spending all their money on any of those addictions I just mentioned, then either gambling or drugs or alcohol or anything, and you continue to financially support them. You continue to give them money, even though they're actually spending the money on their addiction.
Right.
The other one is enabling when we rescue, when we don't let our, again, I'm using a child in this example, but it can, as we mentioned, it can be a partner, accept the consequences of their behavior, that you rush in to save and sometimes when we do that, whoever's engaging in the behavior doesn't get to hit a bottom. They don't get to,
They don't learn,
deal.
yeah. Well, they don't quite learn the lesson. That's the piece that comes up in this sense. And
Yeah,
one of the things I think about too is also it's happened. I watched it happen in different relationships too, where one partner will it's like cover the other person, meaning the other person, maybe goes into massive debt, and the first person would bail them out, would protect them from hitting that bottom. And the challenge is, as the loving partner or loving parent, to witness your loved one hitting bottom is almost insufferable.
Yeah,
So that there's such a challenge to decide which way you want to go. It's like, do I want to maintain the semblance of humanity for the sake of my own comfort so they don't have that challenge, or to let them have that challenge and I'm going to have to go through my own grieving process or upset process whilst it's happening? And
yeah,
that's a real challenging choice to make, frankly.
absolutely. And we'll come to that in a minute about really
Yeah.
who are you protecting when you're
Oh,
enabling.
indeed. Yeah.
So, and so another way enabling can happen is that you set a boundary, and you're pretty firm. This is my bottom line. This is my boundary. You cannot cross it. And the second they cross it, you're like, yeah, okay, well, let me back up my boundary a little bit to
Yeah.
accommodate them. And it's that moving boundary again. And when we do that, we're basically, we should never even create a boundary in the beginning. I'm not talking about inflexibility. I mean, you have to be flexible, but when you keep, and it could be that the enabling behavior, or the behavior rather, could even be physical violence. And if somebody hits you and you make excuses for it, they had a bad childhood, they didn't mean it, they said sorry afterwards, those types of, you can enable as well by excusing, constantly coming up with excuses for why somebody's behaving the way they are.
Absolutely.
Um, and then some of the other behavior is accepting excuses when you absolutely know you're being lied to, but it's easier just to sort of agree and not have one of those confrontations or challenges. So you allow yourself to be manipulated and lied to. So these are some of the ways that enabling. So we've talked about financially, giving money so that the other
Right.
person can continue whatever it is their behavior that's they're addicted to.
Mhm.
Move the boundaries so that if you say, if you do this again, you can't live with me. Sorry, of course you can come and live with me. Um, Again, as I said, the ignoring what's really right under your nose, accepting the excuses and the lies because you don't want to face it. So, but we've laid out what the enabling looks like, but you've really got to look at now, what is it doing? How is it not only not helping the person, as you just said, face consequences, learn from their mistakes, or actually have to face themselves.
Yeah.
If they've constantly got the somebody feeding them excuses or giving them a warm bed to lay in and take care of, it's very, very hard for them to really accept the full consequences of what they're doing. But as I
Uh,
say that, I know it's equally hard, especially for a parent, as a parent myself, to say something like, I'm going to stand by my words and I'm not going to allow you to live with me while you're still using, or engaging in a behavior.
mhm.
The thought of your child being homeless or out in the streets, or your partner, it's terrifying.
Right. Well, absolutely. And part of that, and especially probably more parents with children than is with couples, is there's almost a sense of that we're responsible for them. So if we don't take care of them and keep them safe and protected, even when they're doing these heinous things or whatever those things are, we end up carrying all this guilt inside that we failed them somehow because we didn't make sure they were safe. And so there's this fight inside almost to go between the two places because we know on a mental level, perhaps, that the right thing to do is this, but emotionally, we can't get there necessarily.
Yeah.
And the same in romantic relationships, that happens too, not so much because in emotional, because that's a different level of investment, but in a deep, emotionally connected romantic relationship, when we are in love, oftentimes we can fall into the trap of ignoring glaring signposts or billboards about this person's behavior, but we keep enabling it because we feel like, well, we love them, therefore we should be doing this thing. This is the logic we run. So yeah, definitely a challenge for a lot of people on any level of relationship, whether it's parent or just a couple.
Well, and you bring up a really good point. That is, I think when it's an adult to an adult in a loving relationship, it's often, people don't want to be alone. They'd rather live in denial than
Yep.
see what's right in front of their nose and call out the behavior and set a consequence, which might mean the end of the relationship. I mean,
Hmm.
those are big factors for a lot of people, that they just would choose to to be in denial rather than be alone, which is a scary
They,
prospect to
yeah,
be in.
they want to have somebody to be with, despite the discomfort, pain, and wounding, and all those different things,
Yeah,
rather than being alone. And frankly, maybe be even happier. But they won't look at that lens because they say, no, being alone is so bad.
hmm
Anything's, which means any level of relationship. Yeah, absolutely, a challenging place to be.
yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is, as you said, that the parent is like your job is to care for, and is to I mean, as a parent, it's like you die for your children. You do anything. You put yourself second to your children. And
Right.
whereas in a healthy sort of adult, you're encouraged to maintain that sort of individuation, which again you are with your children. But we've spent so many of those years protecting, nurturing, caring for. It's so ingrained that they, because they're so vulnerable when they're little, they completely depend on you. So you've set up that dynamic. So therefore, it's much harder, I think, anyway, to set firm boundaries with a child and walk and sever a relationship with your child.
Oh yeah, and just to make it more interesting, oftentimes we were raised in a family where that wasn't taught to us how to have healthy boundaries, so we don't know what the model is or how to do it, and so sometimes we're even afraid to risk it because we don't want to make a mistake, and
Mm-hmm.
so we'd sort of stay in a comfortable place because it's easier than trying to step into a new paradigm we've never done before or seen before.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we hinted at earlier, it's like especially I'll talk more from the mother point of view as well, is sometimes when we are overly protecting, say, our children or enabling them, it's really our own discomfort that we are worried about. As much as we're worried about them, of course, we all want them to live, we want them to be healthy, we want them to have amazing lives. But we doubt our own resilience to being able to cope with, our children choosing their own destiny.
Absolutely, that's probably one of the biggest pieces is that because being a parent has a certain framework and an image and a certain portrayal, and if we violate that, we're in deep trouble, really, because we violate that belief we have about ourselves.
Hmm.
And there's a whole thing about when we set up this dichotomy between what we experience and what we think we should be like, and not having the two meet. So yeah, that's a big one for the parent to really look at what they're believing about themselves in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of parents that have had their children steal from them, be violent towards them, and they've had to report them to the police. They've had to uh,
Hmm.
have their, children arrested. I mean, I know it happens all the time in partnerships too. For goodness' sake, it's the same
Right.
thing. When your partner has acted violent towards you and you need to involve the police, but you feel that you're betraying your partner by doing that. You want them to get help, but is this too far? Have I taken it too far? Will they have a record? Am I responsible for that then? There's all these other
Absolutely.
things that come into it. So, but I think,
Absolutely. And
sorry, you were going to say.
I was going to say just one thing came through. Just the I thought of is the extreme of this. The take it to the nth degree is if your child is choosing bad behavior, which you're enabling and not curtailing or setting boundaries up, and they end up losing their life, for example, through drunk driving, something like that, where they do something that's that bad. There's no way back from that. In terms of you can't fix that anymore. Up to that point, you can probably fix it, change it, but when they go to a certain point across the line where that level of lethality is involved, there is no way back from it. So the cautionary tale is in a way it's like maybe you want to intervene or have a conversation or reset your belief system before you get to that point, so you don't end up being trapped in a no-win situation.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking my mind's going 100 miles an hour. There's so many instances
I
I can think
understand.
of where that has happened, but um, it's so hard to sit back. I mean, it's that sort of the saying, put your own life, rather oxygen mask on before you put your children's on. And every time I
Yes.
flew off my children, I'd be like, "Oh, what are you talking about? I'm going to put theirs on first. Of course I am." You know,
Right.
very
Yep.
well saying take care of yourself first so you can then take care of others. But as you say, we're fighting a natural instinct that is ingrained with us since childhood. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and I think it's really important to keep to remind people that even though you have empathy and you understand how against nature it is to what might be perceived as abandon your child. I mean, we're talking about adult children here. We're not talking about young children. We're talking about
Yeah.
late teens or young adults that are doing certain things, and you're still paying the bills and still bailing them out of jail or giving them money for drugs or whatever it is. Um, the thing is that even though it feels like you are abandoning them, and you'd rather, I've heard people say, well, I'd rather them do it in my house under my roof than out on the streets. At least I know they're safe. At least I know, if anything happens, I can call the 911 or things like that. But I think what's so important to look at is, has the unconditional love, has the safe being the safety net, has the being the one that catches them when they fall, has that worked so far? That's what we have to ask ourselves.
And yes, that's a key, because the thing is, we oftentimes will keep thinking, eventually, if I keep doing this, they'll change, or if I keep doing this, they'll be safe, or I keep doing this, I'll feel better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's unfortunately one of these roads that there's no way out of it, but there's no solution. And so it is one of those um, lesser of evils in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have an easy way out from the answer. That's one of the challenges. And so the and this is the hard one. We mentioned before we recorded, so maybe start talking about tough love. It is a sense of, how do we have a framework that we don't cross that line, regardless of what the other person is doing or the child is doing. It's the challenge of being true to ourselves and appearing to be uncaring, or appearing to be callous, or appearing to be unloving. Yet by doing so, we maintain a healthier framework in our own lives. And it is a real challenge when it's a parent-child relationship. It's perhaps easier on a couple relationship, but with a child, there's extenuating circumstances, so to speak. You know.
And there's another one where it actually involves both. Whereas, I had a client once whose husband was a severe alcoholic, who she loved dearly,
Yep.
really. And but for the sake of her children, she knew she had to get a divorce.
Right.
And so therefore, it's the same thing. It's that you're ending a relationship with a romantic, adult relationship for the sake of your children, because to have that level of dysfunction and disease and illness around your children can have a negative effect on them too.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
so that again is a case of, it seems tough when you really do love this person and they are genuinely remorseful and just cannot control their addiction, that you
Hmm.
don't seem to be abandoning them, but for the sake of the children, you have to make that choice. You have to set that limit, that you cannot be in the household as an active addict, or being a danger to my children or to myself.
Absolutely. And then it becomes, because the thing about this, and we talked about this on and off through this talk, is about the self-honoring choices. But it becomes a choice that we make for the sake of somebody else, not for ourselves.
Hmm.
We may be in a relationship with this drunken partner, and we'll leave because of the kids. We wouldn't leave because of ourselves, though.
Hmm.
So when we decide what our own rules are, what our own boundaries are, what we are saying, what's true for us, what loving really means to us. I've been really making some notes about talking about self-love as part of a process I'm teaching, and I'm going to be building out this year. And this feeling of, what does self-love really mean? Does it mean sacrificing ourselves, or does it mean saying no to things that we would otherwise say yes to? And so having the children as um, the pendulum swing of saying, "Okay, now I'm doing this because of them," which we wouldn't have done if they weren't there. It's questions we ask ourselves.
Well, I can answer that one. Having been in exactly that situation, I remember thinking to myself, even if I can't make the healthy choice for myself, because I was addicted in a way, codependent, addicted, even if I can't make the healthy choice for myself, I can make the healthy choice for my children.
There you
Because
go.
I mean, but that's a true codependent there. It's like, oh, I'll accept this bad behavior for me, but I won't accept it for my children. But at least it, I mean, I was aware of it. I was aware that if I hadn't been a mother, I may have made a different choice. But being a mother, I made the right choice for my children, which I think I absolutely 100% believe in. But going back again to this enabling the thing, I think what we have to remember is that when I mean, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. We know that the reason we are enabling is because we're hoping that the person that is addicted or whatever is going to see the light, is going to change, that we're going to
Yes,
participate in their getting well, healthy and well, and this is the way to do it. But I think at some point, I think when I'm thinking about interventions in this case, and it's if you truly love the person that is struggling, and you have given them the benefit of the doubt, and you have given them the support and the love they need. You haven't shamed them and attacked them and blamed them. You have been compassionate and loving. There does need to come the point where you have to see that the way you've been doing things has not been helping. As much as your intentions were incredible, it hasn't been. And that's, I think, when we have to really entertain the prospect of something like an intervention. And there are many organizations out there and places you can get help. You just Google and research and that, and they help you too. They help you struggle with this. That can't be my bottom line. I'll never do that. I'll never walk away from my children. I'll never not be on the end of the phone or on the end of a whatever it is to help. But to help you with that support while you're holding those strong boundaries, so that your partner or child can get the professional help they need.
that is the step, and sometimes the tough love. I couldn't even say it right. Sometimes the tough love action is to talk to ourselves into doing something we wouldn't want to do,
Hmm.
to actually be tough with ourselves, because we ultimately know that the long term result will be much better than if we stay with the way it is. But
Yeah,
boy, it can sometimes be a big ask for ourselves to look in the mirror and say to ourselves, like, I need to do this for us, both me and my partner and the children, all these different things at once. It is a big ask, and I'm so not saying not take it lightly. However, and to do that can be the biggest gift you can give yourself.
yeah. And the other thing that's occurring to me as we're talking right now. Gosh, we're getting feedback there.
I didn't know. Yeah, yeah,
There's a little noise there with the audio, but um, the other thing I'm thinking back to, I had a family member who was struggling, and I remember um, with my mother. She's my mother's passed now, but trying to get my mother to stop enabling, to try and get her to get professional help. And there was this part that was absolutely insistent that she knew best and that outsiders didn't. And so consequently, the siblings didn't get the help they needed. And I'm thinking back to when we were at USM, and I remember a couple of times we would have people in the audience talk with Ron, who they'd say things like and say, well, but I've got to help them. I've got to help them. And I remember Ron saying, we've got to stop playing God. We've
yeah,
got to stop thinking that we know what is better for another person. And that is a huge ask right then, to really step
absolutely.
back and allow that person to go through whatever life experience they're meant to go through, and to not think that we know better than whoever is organizing this universe we live in, and that only us can save them.
It is. I mean, I love the way you said it, because, and I've heard other places too, from other teachers, the understanding that we don't know everything, and so it behooves us to be willing to not know the truth, to not know the answer, and to let things play out a different way than we expected. Because we do have, excuse me, a lot of us have this addiction to control. thinking we're in charge, that we can handle it, we'll make it right, we'll fix it. It's like it's up to us. We'll do everything we need to do, and all this, this continual like spewing out in our minds of what drives us, and to actually acknowledge that maybe we don't know what's really best for the other person is very humbling,
Mm-hmm.
but also extremely freeing when we claim it. I've been there a couple of times where I had to go, you know what, I can't control this. I need to step back and let it happen. There's a sense of relief that happens ultimately, but initially it's kind of like, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. So it is a trusting process to let go and let spirit, God, what is meant to happen out of our control.
Mm-hmm.
Big ask, as you said.
Yeah, yeah. I remember in particular, it was a young woman that was asking. I think her mother was homeless, and I mean, she was consumed with the responsibility of taking care of her mother, and yes, I think it was a huge ask, and one that was that I remember Ron trying to. I mean, I think there were so many people going, but no, we disagree. Of course, you do anything
Oh,
you can.
God, I remember, yes.
You would do anything you can, but sometimes we just don't know what the contracts are that we come into this lifetime to experience.
And oftentimes, when we see it from the outside perspective, looking in at what's going on, we can see that the person who's in the quote, the victim space, is absolutely positively choosing it and will not budge from it. No matter how much the loving, caring child in this case
Mm-hmm.
could help them and fix it for them, make it better for them. And it's like this war between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so letting is really ultimately the best choice to make because there's nothing you can do to fix it. You can't do it against their will.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big one.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's a big subject, and I don't think it's. I think this is the one situation where you 100% need support. Because
Yes,
as we say, we're going against nature almost to step back or to sit on our hands and let a loved one face the consequences of their choices and their actions. And again, this doesn't mean that there's any judgment or blame or attacking. You can have healthy boundaries, and you can stop enabling with love. You don't have to do it with hurt and anger. It can be one of the most loving acts you can ever do. And
absolutely.
when it's relayed in a loving way, it will have much more of a profound effect on the other person than if it's done in a shaming, I can't
Oh,
take it anymore, I'm done, you've pushed me to the limit, whatever those feelings you might be also having. But to simply just with self-respect, just say, I cannot stand by and witness this anymore. I cannot allow myself to be um, either violated in this way or used in this way or anything it is, but just very, very clear, firm, loving boundaries.
absolutely. It's one of the most loving things we can do for ourselves, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And as weird as it may sound, it can be the most loving thing you do for them as well.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and the one that came up for me is also is that what we're talking about here, there's not a fixed formula. This is definitely an individual experience. So what we're saying is these are just possibilities, not things you must apply based on what you're going through. If
Mm-hmm.
you have questions, of course, you can reach out to one of us definitely to get support. But the thing about it is that there's more on the paper, there's more on the table, so to speak, than you may have understood so far. So hopefully, this is giving you some ideas and thoughts about what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we pretty much knocked that one on the head.
Well, for now, yes. This is again, as you said, it's a very deep topic. We could probably do 17 shows on this, but this is a good start, at least.
Exactly. Well, thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you next week. And have a wonderful week, Barry. And I will see you next Tuesday. Take
Absolutely.
care.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.